On today's show, the San Diego Padres announced that John Seidler has been unanimously named as control person, for the Padres. Talking about that, what it means for the team, a couple more MLB signings, and taking a positive look based on a listener article for the Padres in 2025. Lots to get into, so we gotta get started.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Friday, February 7th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, where you can send me all of your questions and whatnot. It is Friday, so let me remind you, Monday is the mailbag, so please feel free to send me some questions. You can even ask me questions about the Super Bowl, right? I don't even care. You can ask me about my thoughts about the Super Bowl. I don't care. We'll be talking about that on Monday, but please at me at all those places or leave a comment in the YouTube if you are a video listener. We love you too. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you, though, by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. With that all out of the way, guys, we got to talk about some big things with the Padres going on, namely John Seidler being named the control person. Then we're going to talk about a couple free agent signings. And then, of course, talk about a listener article that was sent to me. And we're going to talk about that and just kind of go over the notes and why there should be optimism regarding this team. So a little bit of dare I say, a little bit of a projection preview thing, but we're actually going to be doing that on Tuesday, going over Fangraphs' Zips projections. I believe that they dropped, and I'm just curious to see what they have for every player, because I don't know. I just think that the Zips projections are always good fodder for an episode, if anything, right? So let's get started, though. John Seidler, named the main control person of the San Diego Padres, was voted on unanimously. I think that this was expected, right? MLB owners approved of him. Now, MLB owners approving of people is not exactly something that is going to give the people of Padres fans, Friar Faithful, a lot of faith, because they also approved John Fisher to join the executive committee for MLB. And for those who don't know, John Fisher has literally never done essentially anything right in his entire life, except for have a rich parent. That's basically all John Fisher has done. And that's the problem with baseball, right? You know what I mean? Much more so than the Dodgers is stuff like that, ostensibly connected to the rest of the league. So that's a problem. But even still, that is what is being reported. Reading from MLB Trade Rumors, John Seidler, the brother of late Padres chairman Peter Seidler, was unanimously approved as the team's new control person in a vote among the league's other 29 owners. Kevin Acee of the San Diego Union Tribune reports the move will become official once the paperwork naming John the trustee of Peter's trust is finalized in about a month's time. Acee adds, Padres ownership has of course been embroiled in a legal battle in recent months as Peter's widow, Shohei Ohtani, has filed suit against her late husband's brothers, alleging that they've breached fiduciary duty and committed fraud as successors of Peter's trust. Shohei Ohtani accused brothers-in-law Matt and Rob Seidler of selling assets to themselves far below market prices in an effort to consolidate control of the franchise, and of violating Peter's wishes that she serve as interim control person of the club before passing ownership onto the couple's children at a later date. Matt, of course, contested it in a formal response where he accused his sister-in-law of attempting to manufacture claims against the trustees. It's been a whole bunch of things, right? And then Shield responded saying there's nothing to support the claims of wrongdoing, all this stuff. But basically, Matt's formal response is basically the only thing filed formally, I think, on the record in response to all the lawsuit stuff. I imagine we're going to see this litigated further as time goes along. But as of right now, it is expected to be John. And the reason I brought up that thing earlier about how it's not good to assume that MLB owners, frankly, any owners of any of the other sports too, that this unanimous approval means they know this is a sport, it usually actually does very well for teams to actually just have the worst people in charge, apparently. That's what they love, because revenue sharing, all sorts of different things involved, that they can do nothing and then they can cry poor come to CBAs, which has been a little bit of a point of the contention that I've had lately that I actually got from someone else, a friend of mine named Peyton, actually, who was like, I actually think that a lot of teams have been not spending this offseason. Teams that are on the cusp, so more than ever. Like we've just seen a lot of like lack of spending, and you've of course seen the Dodgers, you've seen the Yankees, you've seen the Mets, teams like that spend a lot. And there's a belief that it's like they're just gearing up for the CBAs next year, and they're just gonna get ready to cry poor, like I just said. But I think in general, this is one of those things, with John being named, unanimously approved, that there's just so many other questions that it's hard for me to put a stamp on this. I know that like the Padres contingent online is very pro Shield. Personally, I think that we have to be very careful not to jump to conclusions. But I understand it, right? I understand because we have not seen a lot of spending by this team, and the biggest move that they have made since Peter's passing is trading away Juan Soto. Now that move worked, right? They got a lot of pitchers in return, they got a lot of depth, they got some relief and whatnot. But now that you're under the luxury tax and you haven't really made any moves, you couldn't keep players like Kyle Higashioka, and then Jerkson Profar is on the record being like, yeah, they've got an ownership problem. So I understand the fear there, but we still have to see, right? I feel like my opinion on this is going to be predicated largely upon whether or not they spend in the future. And I'm not talking about spending big time money, right? Now, that's not what they need to do, right? What you need in baseball is to spend some big time money, and then you just have some stuff around the edges, right? And I think that that's what's key to winning a World Series. And usually around the edges is having some good depth, having some good prospects, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the only way the Padres are going to win a World Series. And the reason I know that is because look at them these past few years, right? Last year, their breakout year, one of the things that happened was, yes, you had some big production from stars, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Dylan Cease. We didn't know he was a star at the time, but Michael King, right? But the big thing about the story of the Padres last year was some below market guys that they got, and some rookies in the case of Jackson Merrill that they had that filled out all the edges, right? You don't only get those players, but they supplant all the other spending that you do. So it's going to depend a lot on that. I'm curious to see if the Seidler brothers are going to buy out Shield, right? Like, I don't really know what we're going to see happen. And if they do buy out Shield from this whole thing and settle this sort of kerfuffle, for lack of a better term, I imagine that, like, do they even have the funds to buy her out? Because if that happens, I would then wonder, okay, so how many funds are there to spend on the team? There's just a lot of questions going forward, right? And I do acknowledge that it is weird that, like, we've basically never heard from John Seidler. So while, yes, there is legitimacy to the reports, I think Kevin Acey's report was very well done for the San Diego Tribune about the kind of some of the dispute around Shield Seidler, like whether or not she was involved in the organization. Of course, I'm not as familiar with Kevin Acey in the past. Someone has told me he was a little bit of a shill maybe when talking about the Chargers, who then, of course, moved to LA. So I get that. I understand that. But I'm just going off his report. A lot of people, a lot of sources, even if some anonymous, that's just kind of how it has to be. I understand that a lot of people are looking at this being like, we haven't heard from John at all. So why is it that we just have to trust this guy, considering that there's been no money spent, and we don't even know what the dude looks like practically, right? But we're supposed to believe the articles that keep yelling at us and telling us that Shield is the one that's pretending to be involved in the team when she's actually not. So I understand all of that. But bottom line, I think we need to wait a little bit longer, and I get the fear. It's one of those things where I don't blame any opinion, I guess, on this situation for Padres fans. If you're one of those that's like, hey, let's wait, maybe she's just trying to get money out of nothing when nothing was really actually there, and Peter would have done better to finalize this if it was true, that's fine. And I'm also with the people that are like, look at what the Seidler bros have done. They're basically silent and they aren't spending any money and all this other stuff, right? So it's a bad situation, and I think it really has affected the Padres in a lot of ways. So I'm going to be, of course, covering it whenever we hear anything new. We will talk about it absolutely on this show because frankly, what else are we going to talk about? And also because it really does impact the Padres going forward. We will find over the next bunch of years whether or not it was bad that this happened or if it was good that this happened, right? I don't know which one right now. Frankly, I lean a little tiny. I'm like 51-49 bad. There's just something wrong. They're not spending. I just don't think that you would stop, right? But there's still a lot going on this offseason, guys, and there's still a lot of players left. So we got to talk about those and, of course, talk about a little bit of optimism because that's what we got to do on this podcast sometimes, despite the fact that your boy recently wrote an article at Just Baseball you guys can go check out titled Power Ranking the Worst, Most Miserable Moments of the Padres offseason, which you could go read, of course, at Just Baseball. You can find it on my Twitter or my Blue Sky, whatever you want. But first, before we get into the rest of the stuff for today's show, guys, I need to take a second to talk to you about one of our sponsors, and that is, what is it, guys? I want you to take a guess. What do you think? It's one of our longtime ones, and it is our friends over at Prize Picks, because the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. That's it. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. So what can I say? You want to go over on Saquon Barkley yards? Hey, I'm sleeping. I don't know if Xavier Worthy might do a little something. AJ Brown has been a tiny bit quiet in the playoffs, just a little bit. Devontae Smith, you kind of can go anywhere here. Everyone's out on Jalen Hurts. That makes me almost kind of want to be in on him. There's so much stuff that you can go, guys, and you can tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And just like that, everybody, as you see me sipping my water, if you're watching on the video, we are back here, thriving and vibing on the Locked On Padres podcast. Again, remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your grandparents and your great-great-grandparents and your cousins and your nephews, whatever, to go subscribe. And also tell them, too, why not, to send me questions at Javipeno on Twitter/X and Blue Sky and in the YouTube comments if you want your questions answered for Monday's show when we really roar back with, I believe, 5 days a week. I'm like 99% sure of that. I don't know why I have a rubber band on my hand, but whatever. I fidget with things sometimes. Let's talk about some other news really quickly. Not too much stuff, but we've got a couple things. First of all, Alex Bregman rumored to be being pursued by the Toronto Blue Jays. I just think that that's interesting. I think it's fun. I don't want him to go back to the Astros because someone like me, I just like seeing movement. I think it's fun seeing chaos, and I think it'd be fun seeing him go back there, but we shall see. He is basically the last remaining free agent, impact big time free agent on the market. And I think that what we've seen is that, you know, this has been an offseason with a lot of movement in a lot of ways. Not just the Dodgers. There's been a lot of moves made this offseason. I'm curious to see what happens with some of those other veterans that are out there. They're the David Peralta types, dare I say. There's definitely some bullpen arms out there. So, going to be curious to see how that goes. And I mentioned we only have Alex Bregman left for the big-time free agents. That's because Pete Alonso agreed to a deal with the New York Mets. And it was a 2-year deal, by the way. 2-year deal, which is pretty wild. $54 million, 2 years, $10 million signing bonus. I believe he has an option after the first year. And some people might be saying, wow, Boris, he's cooked. Why is it? Hey, frankly, this part I agree with. Scott Boris, why couldn't you have messed up and your client have messed up when you were negotiating with Eric Hosmer? That would have been nice. We would have appreciated that. But no, good deal for the Mets. The Mets are going to be a team to watch out for this year, obviously with Juan Soto, and then, of course, with Lindor, with Pete Alonso, with Brandon Nimmo, with some of the more underrated players out there. I forgot the home run hitter that they have right now. I'm blanking on his name. Mark Vientos. Pitching will be a concern, but I think that team will be very good. So congrats to the Mets. Obviously, probably wasn't an option for the Padres, but let me tell you, I think it's worth noting that moments like these, this 2-year 54, it's why for years I've been talking about the Padres shouldn't be viewing and fans shouldn't be viewing as just go get the best player that costs a lot. Always do that, because I get a lot of comments saying like, go sign Castellanos, go sign Trey Turner, go sign Aaron Judge, go sign. Sometimes when you already have a lot of money spent on a couple players, in the case Tatis and Machado, that's it. Those are your 2 superstars, or maybe one on the pitching side in the case of Musgrove. Then you do the moderate contracts. You do things like Pete Alonso that might pop up, right? Guys that you think might be undervalued and might not be getting paid as much as they wanted to on the market. So then they settle for these like prove-it-year deals, and that can really work. It really can. I think that it could absolutely work. So just keep that in mind, guys. Next time you're getting annoyed that the team didn't make the sexy big-time signing. You know what I mean? Because sometimes it comes back to bite you if you do too many, if you try to just only spend your way out. The Rangers, they also had some good prospects to back up the superstars that they did. So that's what I'm going to say on that. Also, last thing, it was actually just announced at the time I was recording this on Thursday night. Ippei Mizuhara, Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, was sent to 5 years in prison. I only want to talk about this because, frankly, I think that this is one of those great cases of like just the tribalism of fan bases sometimes, where a lot of conspiracy theories out there, right? Everybody knows this. Dodgers fans, if you're still lurking in the comments, you guys know about this. And frankly, like in a lot of ways, I think that the conspiracies around the Shohei Ohtani thing are tempting. I get it. And frankly, I don't totally hate the idea that people are, or not that I don't hate the idea, I understand that people are like, wait, so this guy was betting millions of dollars and just like Shohei had no idea? My response to that is, you got to remember that Shohei Ohtani is not just like us common folk, unless there's someone like super rich listening to this. I don't know. But it's not like the rest of us were like $1 million or $2, or I forgot the exact money that, yeah, maybe he doesn't notice that as much. You know how much he's getting in endorsement deals, not to mention from the Dodgers, not to mention what he already got from previous teams and already from previous endorsements. I see him in the New Balance commercial every 3 minutes. On top of that, I think that the thing that I really don't like is this assumption, even if it is correct, that government agencies haven't lied before. I do not understand the incentive as of right now. And I understand if you are, you raise your, I don't mind if people raise their eyebrows, but to be so honed in, and this goes especially for Padres fans, I think, to be so like set in your ways. Nope, clearly there's a conspiracy they covered for him. It's like you think that the IRS, the FBI, Major League Baseball, Ippei, the bookie, like especially the formermost of those two, the FBI and the feds, I don't understand their incentive to cover for Shohei Ohtani. That's my why would the feds want to cover for Major League Baseball is my kind of thing, and specifically the Dodgers. You know what I mean? So I just think everyone needs to calm down. But again, what do I know? I could be an idiot. Maybe he did. I don't know. But I'm just sorry, but I think that there's been plenty of investigations, and I just don't see it. I just don't see it. But whatever. I feel like this is one of those things where arguing with people just kind of won't change anybody's minds. But whatever, guys. Let's now get into the last topic of the show, which is from someone from Blue Sky. That's right. You can send me questions on there, and someone did in the form of an article that they sent me. My main man, Aaron Patty, wrote an article on his blog, and as a writer myself, which I've mentioned many times on the show, I just have a soft spot for writing. So anybody who sends me articles, I usually read them because I just want to see what everybody's up to. And I just love to see everybody's takes and how everybody's style works and all that stuff and whatnot. And basically, my man Aaron kind of just got really positive about the Padres and was like, I'm going to go the other direction and say, I actually think that we could be really fine. And he had a bunch of reasons for that. And I think that it's totally fair, right? Like, this has been a doom and gloom offseason. Like I said a million times, I literally wrote an article making fun of all the different things that went wrong for the Padres, everything from a couple tweets to talking about the TV show Atlanta and whether or not some people are just destined to lose. Yeah, I know, I understand. I've been a little bit morbid lately, especially for people who've been following me for a while about the Padres. But I do think that there is a sense, there is a reason to be optimistic about the Padres. And I wanted to talk about a couple points that were made in the piece, just as potential topics that we're going to run through really quickly. One of the things that Aaron brings up is just the idea that there's a lot of good players on this team, and there's a lot of guys that they did lose, but there's still a lot of good talent. And in the case of, say, he mentions, for Profar and Higgy, I love them. They were amazing for us last season and couldn't have asked for more production from them. That being said, historically speaking, they overachieved. They boosted their stock and got paid. That is amazing. I cannot be happy for them. But realistically, did we expect them to come back with the Padres in 25 and have the same production they did in 24? For the vibes, yes, they were both amazing clubhouse guys, and I think that there is a lot, and that is or a lot of where their value was hidden, but the vibes are still intact, especially with the signing of someone like Elias Diaz, who is an amazing clubhouse presence. I do agree with the lattermost part of that, but I disagree with some other things. I think that the reason people are upset with losing Profar and Higgy, or at least maybe this is me projecting, my frustration with that is those are not players that cost too much, right? 3 years, 42 is not that bad for Jurickson Profar to the Braves, and certainly Kyle Higashioka, who I believe is making like $7 million this year. That's not that much considering your team got under the luxury tax threshold and was a win away from the NLCS. And in my opinion, the way things were going, I really do think that had the biggest momentum of like any team in the sport last year. I will stand on that to my grave. On paper is different than in the moment. Of course, it didn't bounce that way, but I think that's the issue. Not as much as like, oh no, specifically, we didn't get Jurickson Profile and Kyle Higashioka. I just think it says a lot, and it adds to the frustration with the ownership dispute that you weren't able to bring these players back. And I also disagree on Profar. We've talked a lot about in the show with his weighted on base and expected weighted on base being nearly identical. The fact that his contact rate went up on pitches outside the zone. The fact that his hard hit rate spiked dramatically, right? The fact that he's always had the walking ability. You can't really fake hard hit and making contact on more and more pitches outside the zone, especially off-speed stuff, especially fast and velocity and all these sort of things. I just don't think you can fake that. This is not like Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger had he was in the 15th percentile or something like that in hard hit rate and still managed 25 home runs. That's always a red flag. That wasn't Profar. I think Profar is going to be good, and I think that's why people are frustrated, especially considering it's not like we know for sure that we have a backup. I imagine they're going to bring in a veteran, right, just in case, to have somebody that's at least there, known and proven, just in case it doesn't work out with Tirso Ornelas. But again, it's Tirso Ornelas, so that's my fear, is that you just don't necessarily have the biggest backup stuff behind them. I'm a little bit less worried about catcher, only because I'm starting to you guys are gonna laugh, long-time listeners. The Luis Campusano hive, the life support, the little, the little line, whatever that's called, the monograph for people, and it zips. It's been a deadline for a while, and it's spiked a tiny bit lately. I'm wondering if the Padres might know something, and they're this guy might have a little bit of value because he was so bad at the plate last year. I don't know. He's still young, right? He's still young, but for me, it's the Profar thing. The fact that this guy is so good for your team, he's such a beloved favorite, and you didn't want to go out and get him. I think that's a red flag. But before we talk about the rest of the points in your article, and most of which I'm going to disagree with, by the way, not to be mean, my man Aaron, not to be mean, just giving my opinions. Before we get into that, guys, though, I just want to take a quick second to talk about our other sponsor, is the one that you heard at the beginning of this old podcast. That is our friends over at Game Time. Here's the thing, guys. NFL playoff games, the Super Bowl, all that stuff, and frankly, any NFL game in general, it is an experience like no other, and it brings fans together. And Game Time is here to help to help make buying tickets so much easier. Game Time even has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's great. It's really great. So if you want to buy, I heard them Luka Doncic tickets to the Lakers might be a hot ticket item, you know what I mean? So if you want to go in and get those, I like using Game Time because they just get you all the stuff. Plenty of deals closer to the game. If you find out you're free all of a sudden, they've got flash deals, zone deals. They let you see all sorts of options for whatever you need. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed with Game Time. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing, talking about a little bit of an article about why to be optimistic for the Padres in 2025. We just talked about Profar and Higgy, so I do disagree with that part with the production and whatnot. But I do agree with Elias Diaz. I think Elias Diaz is a decent addition. I was partially Yasmani Grandal, personally. I know Diaz is really fun in the locker room and whatnot, but I just think that he has a little bit greater of a downside. But thankfully, it's not just Martin Maldonado that they're counting on, right? And he's at age 37, so I'm okay with that. He also mentions, I know that the ownership dispute sheds a negative shadow on the clubhouse, but that is where manager Mike Shildt and Captain Manny Machado come in. These two are true and tested leaders, and they are both certain about their futures with this organization. Mike Shildt through 27 and Manny through 2033. I agree on Shildt as much as I can. I think that Shildt has, it's more so that he's done it throughout, right? And we know that the Cardinals are clearly entering a phase of, we don't want to be a good organization anymore. Let's just be really cheap and be dumb. So clearly them firing Mike Shildt was probably a mistake. It didn't make any sense. And then on top of that, he also did well, obviously, with the Padres this past season. But when it comes to Manny Machado, conflicting reports. You know what I mean? Whether or not he's a great locker room guy. You can't forget, after 23, he had some weird comments that do not immediately fill you with the confidence that this is a great locker room guy. Now, here's the thing. It's quotes. I don't know the full situation there. You kind of have to be in there to fully get it. But it is fair to say a guy who's like, what am I supposed to do? This isn't college. Like, what do I have to baby people and whatnot? Everyone comes here and does their job, which I get, which is true. You can both be right and it also not necessarily be great for the team. So I don't know if Manny Machado is a proven like locker room leader presence. I do think that there is something to be said, especially considering all this ownership turmoil. You're going to want to have some really good vibes in the clubhouse and some good locker room leaders. And I don't know, we know for sure that Manny Machado is that. Sure, you've got your, Joe Musgrove and whatnot, but he's hurt and all these things. And Tatis is still super young and whatnot. Jackson Merrill is clearly like an alpha personality, but he's still young. He's not going to own the locker room immediately, I don't think. So I do have questions about that considering all the drama in the organization. But that's not all. You also brought up David Peralta. He's still a free agent, and I could see us bringing him back on another 1-year deal. Let's remember, there is no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. 100% agree on that, Aaron. I think that these next few weeks we're finally going to see some more Padres signings. I think that overall, this is where you get those like fringe free agents, I think, right? These are the free agents that aren't that exciting, right? They're not going to freak anybody out, but I do think that there's some players out there, maybe some that we don't even know, maybe even Jason Hayward if they want to put him in left field, right? Maybe even Michael A. Taylor. Well, he's usually a center fielder, but you get my point, right? I just think that there's guys out there that you can feel decent about that aren't going to cost too much. You can go out and sign David Peralta. You could go out and sign Adam Duvall, Travis Janikowski, Mark Hanna. Right? There are players out there where you're like, okay, this isn't going to be great, but at least it means we're not fully relying on Tirso Ornelas to be awesome immediately. Even though I think Tirso can at least be a average major league player. Not much else you can ask for. Not going to get a Jackson Merrill out of him probably, but at least you can just hope for that. So if we're looking at it from that perspective, I do agree. If it's just getting some guys, there's still some guys out there that can fill up the lineup. We're not starting, Jorge Alfaro in left field. No offense to Alfaro. I don't know why he just caught a stray from me just now, but you get my point, right? You're not getting 0.0 win players that are going to start there for sure. If anything, they're going to have a little bit of a crop of guys that they're going to test out. I remember not too long ago, David Dahl was playing games for the Padres, and he had a couple moments or two, and then they moved on, and then they moved in. It's a long season. You got to have some depth, and I think they can accrue that. You also mentioned Darvish, Machado, and Tatis have all proven that they are able to be some of the best players in their respective positions in Major League Baseball. And let's not forget, most of the 2024 season, either one of them or all of them were on the injured list or restricted list. Even being out for a majority of last season, Tatis and Darvish were both considered to be two of the MVPs of the Padres, and Manny is going to be Manny. He has shown us time and time again. If the three of them are healthy and perform how we know they can perform, they can carry this team, and Tatis is still a young star who is 100% driven and capable of having MVP season. Tatis, this is the point. Now, I disagree with Darvish. I think Darvish is a guy where his value and being a huge piece for this Padres team will be more seen in the postseason. I just think that we've seen how many innings is this guy going to give you, and he's getting older, right? You can't fully rely on that. That's why losing Musgrove was really rough, which you also mentioned. There's a possibility in which Manny Machado is a 4.3 win player and Tatis is a 7. And it just totally makes up for the loss of Ha-Seong Kim or the loss of Jurickson Profar, where you're just getting an MVP season out of him. I will say, though, and we're going to talk about this more on Tuesday with his projections, it is a fair thing to say, even if he hits the ball harder than almost anybody, right? He's walking a tiny bit less, I will say. Doesn't have as big of the on-base percentage that he had those initial years. But even with all that stuff, even with the weighted on-base suggesting that he has been getting unlucky, it is a fairly reasonable thing to say, hey, he's got a high 700 OPS ever since the steroid suspension, right? And then before that, he was like a mid to low 900 OPS guy. I don't like the virtue signaling, dare I say, dare I say, pearl clutching sometimes of people who are acting like the steroids are like the worst thing someone can have in Major League Baseball. They never stand up and talk about some of the other bad characters we have in this league for different reasons. That being said, if you're using it as analysis for being worried about Tatis, he's going to be a great player. But is the MVP potential something we have to re-examine? I think it's fair. It's been a long enough time. I know he was hurt last year, but also 2023 he was rough. We gave him a break there because he was coming back from the injury. And I understand last year he got hurt too, but it's reasonable to expect. Like, hey, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see that version of Tatis again before I just keep assuming that it's coming back. He'll be a great player. There's no doubt about that. I think he's a 4-win player at worst, absolute worst, especially with the defense. But it's still worth bringing up. Then you brought up Cronenworth and Xander Bogaerts. They both struggled for the majority of 2024. Xander had a slash line of 264, 307, 381, and his career average is 289, 352, 451, while Cronenworth had a line of 241, 324, 390, and his career average is 256, 336, 431. This not only shows that they were barely above, if not below average, but they were also underperforming their individual stats from previous years, and that we should expect that to progress. I strongly disagree with this. I think Cronenworth actually really low-key was awesome for what we needed him to be and what the expectations were, especially the beginning of last year, especially the first half. He was really hitting the crap out of the ball. But the Xander Bogaerts thing, it's not just slash lines, man. This is my thing, man. It's not just slash lines. It's the fact that his on-base percentage has gone down. He doesn't swing at the first pitch basically ever. He's always putting himself in an 0-1 count. He is not walking as much as he used to be. His expected win on base has gone down basically every year over the last few seasons. Xander Bogaerts is very worrying. Now, I will say, if you just want to be optimistic, it's almost like it can't get any worse, right? It has to at least, it can't get this bad, right? You would think, but then again, this is a team that had Eric Hosmer. I've seen plenty of teams have players that you're like, Javier Baez, you're just a 47 WRC plus guy now. It's not impossible. I don't think he's that bad, but I think that the Xander Bogaerts, we cannot assume that he's going to bounce back whatsoever. I'm hoping, but the literal only empirical evidence that we have for Xander Bogaerts' bounce back as of right now, in my opinion, from what we've read and what we've seen, is just, well, he's Bogaerts. It can't get this bad, right? And I don't like counting on stuff like that, so I am worried about that. Then you talked about Luis Arraez. He's considered to be one of the best contact hitters in the league. Also an amazing clubhouse presence. Career slash line of 323, 375, 420, which he underperformed last season due to a torn ligament in his thumb that he played through the majority of the 172 games that he played with the Padres last season. I do agree on that point. I think that Arraez has been dragged a little bit through the mud this offseason. I worry about his defense. I worry about his base running. I worry about his total lack of power. But I think he's been dragged through the mud. I wouldn't be shocked if he's like a 2.5 win player next year. And if you're expecting star, no, don't do that for Arraez. But if you're expecting change of pace bat, guy you could plug at the top of the lineup, he has a good ability to just put the ball in play at all times. He has the ability to go on an absolute tear, especially in the clutch. That's fine. But don't view him as this top-level second baseman. I just don't think you should do that. Rainy Vasquez has shown a lot of improvement in the second half of the season in the minors, as well as the 7 innings of no-hit baseball he threw against the D-backs at the end of the 2024 season. If it were up to me, this is what the rotation would look like. It would include Randy Vasquez. Randy, there's some hope. I think that, like, basically what you're getting at is overall, we've got stars still, and we've got some great players still. I think that the doom is almost not to do with the roster, but due to the lack of improving and fixing anything that might be there with the roster. And one of the things you bring up, though, this is, I think, my number one thing for the Padres right now. The Padres bullpen is stacked, you said. It includes names like Suarez, Adam, Estrada, Monahan, Hoeing, Sean Reynolds, Yuki Matsui, Wandy Peralta, Johnny Brito, Ron Marinaccio, Alec Jacob, Tom Cosgrove, Stephen Kolek, and Austin Davis. Some of those, Kolek wasn't great, right? Wandy Peralta, not great. But all those other names were low-key really amazing. He says, I feel that losing Tanner Scott has made everyone believe that the bullpen is screwed, but we still have a lot of amazing pieces that could have an amazing impact on winning games. I do agree. I think that the loss of Tanner Scott genuinely is totally fine. I really, really do believe that. It's a bummer that he went to the Dodgers. I think that's the thing that was more annoying. Not just that they lost him, but that they lost him to the team that you got him for because he was so great against Shohei. I agree on that note, but I do think that it has been a little bit overstated that we lost a closer. You still have Adam. I think Yuki Matsui is going to be awesome. I think Jeremiah Estrada, while, rookie year to year, it's possible that things don't progress the same way. Same thing goes for Jackson Merrill. There's still a lot of good talent on this team, man. And I think that they can be good. But overall, I think that one of the reasons I've been doom and gloom is just the Padres also didn't make big splashes last year. Are they going to be able to do that again this year, where they like didn't really, go out and spend? I understand that why they didn't. I get it. We've been through that 100 times. And then again, they didn't spend, and we're just going to expect that a team that had the best WRC plus in high leverage situations last year, about a 149 compared to the like 117, 120 around that range. I forgot the exact numbers that the Dodgers had, was second place among all major league teams. They were so much better than every other team in that regard, and that usually doesn't progress year to year. We're going to talk about this more on Tuesday's show, the Zips projections for each player. I think that should be a lot of fun. We're going to start with going through the offense, and then we're going to talk about pitching. Because it's also true that these projections, the Pacoda thing that Baseball Prospectus does, which we haven't talked about, projected the Padres at 82 wins. It also projected the Padres at 82 wins last year, and that was dead wrong, and I was adamant that didn't make any sense last year. Adamant. I was like, this team was historically bad in the clutch. It's not going to happen again. And they still won. What was it, like 82 games? So you think we're going to be just as bad in that regard? I just didn't understand that. I think that they punished the team too much for Soto being gone and didn't acknowledge that literally every other player, absent Ha-Seong Kim, underperformed when it came to driving in runs. It was actually maddening. I'll never forget 2023. You want to it's like the Clockwork Orange. Like my Clockwork Orange, like forcing my eyes open to watch the TV would be like someone showing me the 2023 season again. Like that would be the equivalent if the government gets me or whatever. They'd be like, you must now watch Xander Bogaerts grounded to double plays all year, Manny Machado grounded to double plays and swing at first pitches, and Tatis be left by himself, all that stuff. Totally agree with that. But Aaron, I appreciate you writing at me. If anybody writes about the Padres, please message me. I have a soft spot for writing, but I think that optimism is needed, but I think some of the areas you brought up, I am not as optimistic in. So we'll see how that all goes down in the future. But again, that about does it, everybody, for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. One last time, follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Feel free to @ me there, post at me, tweet at me, DM me your questions from Monday's mailbag, as well as leaving comments in the YouTube video. For my video listeners, I heart you. But with that all being said, guys, until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies. Everybody, enjoy the big game on Sunday as well. Take care.